Good morning, Eric.
Hi, Chelsea.
How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Good.
Good to see you in the studio here today.
Yes, it's nice to be back
Nice
here.
when you're actually here.
But I did have I had a question for you. So I know that you call yourself a hacker, but you never you don't say it often. And I was wondering if it's because of like the connotation that comes along with the term.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we've talked about this a couple times, but it's an important point that to me, the word hacker means something different than it does for other people. And I think that's an important thing. It's important to understand definitions when we use words. And I've talked about this in other areas too. When we use words, we need to make sure we have the same common definition or understanding of those words. I tend not to use the word hacker often because to me it's a broad, loosely defined term.
I was going to say, do you think there is like is there one common definition anymore or no?
I think it depends on who you are. Like the reason I don't use it is it means something different to me than I think it does to the average person. And that's why I think it's worth exploring and why I think we should have a broader discussion. I think there's a lot of interest in other aspects to it, not just around what the word hacker means or doesn't mean, but some other kind of ancillary areas that would be fun to explore.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk about it. But
well, and there's different types of hackers as
sure.
well, right?
Sure. Well, and that's where I try to use different words, but I think they're worth exploring and worth understanding a little bit better and getting other perspectives on as well, which is, of course, our whole thing. And you ask me questions. Questions are our other whole thing. So what do we want to explore this, or how do we want to explore this as a question?
So I think that the way that hackers are portrayed in the media is that they're all bad. Is that the reality?
That's a huge part of it. That's a huge part of it. I agree. Yeah. So maybe we can discuss whether all hackers are bad, or really even just what the term really means. What is a hacker?
Right. Yeah.
And what isn't a hacker? And are they all evil?
Right.
Maybe that's what we have to explore.
Is Eric evil?
I'm a hacker, but I'm not evil, so is that okay? All right, we're going to talk about hacking and hackers, or to hack, or what a hack is, but some other terms and areas around that and where the definition really came from, where the word evolved from. I love getting into word etymology sometimes because I think it helps you get a better perspective on the word.
And you explained it to me before, and it changed my perspective on it as well.
But we're not going to change the world's perspective. So I try to be realistic. I'm not going to change the minds of the world and redefine the word and have Webster's kind of update their definition. But it's a fun exploration of what the word is, and maybe some of us can start using better words to more properly convey what it is we're talking about. Like if we're talking about someone who's up to illegal activity, hacker to many implies that, but to me, cyber criminal is better, or black hat, or some of these other words that I think can be more descriptive, more properly, specifically descriptive. But I think to get there, we have to understand where it came from, why the word did become what it became, and explore some of the other aspects.
Some explaining to do.
We have some explaining to do. But to help us with that, as always, I want to welcome in a guest. I'm very excited to have him with us. I've known Ken for a while, and he's another fellow old school guy. I know I keep throwing old school guys at you because that's who I know, and I'm one of them. But yeah, Ken Roberts, we've had some great conversations about this and other things, and always love talking to Ken. He's got a great perspective. He's got quite a great history, and his experiences go way beyond cyber. He does work in cyber, currently for Fortinet through acquisition within the recent past. I'll let him explain his title and his role, but Ken's interests go way beyond just this and his history, and you can even see from some of the stuff in his wall and his background, his forays into rock music and military and other things that have all kind of, again, I like to think that broadens somebody's perspective doing other stuff. So Ken, tell folks a little bit more about your interest in this topic and where it comes from.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. And Chelsea, hello. Ken Roberts. I live in Griffin, Georgia, which you can't tell by my accent because I was born in Liverpool in England a long time ago. And this is where my journey starts. In 1972, I was sent to night school at UMIS, this is the University of Manchester, and that's where Professor Alan Turing learned his skills before he worked for the British and American governments during World War II. So if you then move on 40 years or so from then, I get seconded to work by the Home Secretary, which in American terms is the Secretary of Defense, to do military intelligence. And it's kind of weird. It wasn't an option. You're just told, hey, you're going to go and work with the military and do counter-terrorism against terrorists who were attacking Britain at that time. And basically, all of a sudden, Science Applications as a corporation shuffled me up and said, hey, we're going to send you all around the world. So I ended up working in 22 countries, doing a lot of weird stuff for a lot of governments, specializing in deep packet processing, which is a whole new topic on its own, but intercepting phone messages, network messages, copying them, altering them, and then became an expert in threat intelligence, sent to the University of Glasgow to become a professional hacker. And that's where we kind of lead that part. But my day job just right now, I'm a consulting systems engineer. So I'm taking all of that experience of 37 years of working in computing, 52 years of playing with computers, if we want to use the word playing, and trying to help people to make the world a safer place. And that's kind of my motto, make the world a safer place. So great to meet you all.
Feel the same way, and for whatever little bits you can do to make the world a safer place. I love that you use the word playing too, because for some of us, it is fun. I mean, I don't want to say that too loudly. I still want to get paid to do it, but work in technology and computers, it's been a passion as far back as I can remember. And that's kind of why what makes it enjoyable to a degree. It's still stressful at times, and it is work. But
I think it's also worth diving into the fact that you really touched on, you want to make the world a safer place, and that's why you hack.
And yet you called yourself a hacker.
Yeah. So what is the difference?
And I do as well. So I'll go back and ask you, Ken, where do you first recall hearing the word hack or hacker in any kind of context related to what we do?
Yeah, so basically the way that I use it in reference to myself is when I'm talking to the companies and the governments that I work for, my deal is protecting their intellectual property, their customer data, their regulated data, and to understand how to protect that, I've first got to understand the risks to those organizations. And the risks are, is it someone inside, is it someone outside, and how are they going to use those risks and ways to get into the network to take that data or cause disruption. So if I want to understand that, I've got to put myself with that mindset and look at it and say, how would I get to this data if I was a malicious person? And then what do I have to do as a cybersecurity expert to stop that happening? So first of all, I've got to produce the visibility and see what's happening, right? I can't react to anything if I can't see it. So first of all, I've got to build my visibility, and then I've got to build my protection. So my role is improve the visibility, improve the understanding of that visibility, and then provide the protection. So that's where I see myself sitting with my white hat on as a white hacker.
That's one of those other, we're going to introduce two additional terms here that you just kind of brought up, and one is white hat, which to me is a much more descriptive definition, because the way I hear hacker, it doesn't imply intent. Hacking or being a hacker is an activity.
Right.
It's an action, and you can have actions applied for good or for evil.
Right. And so there are two different.
Well, one of
forms,
the
right?
oldest that I remember way to imply intent is black hat and white hat.
Yeah.
Black hat is the dark side, up to evil, up to no good. The white hat is the defender, using the same skills though, and they're both hackers.
So you also said something, Ken, that I found interesting. So, and I read something before that said to catch a hacker, you have to be a hacker or think like a hacker. Is it hard to switch on and off between like getting in the mindset of somebody who is going to maliciously hack so you can do something good with it or protect people with it? Like, is it easy to flip on and off, or?
It's very easy to understand the difference. And what's really interesting is, because you didn't mention red hats, green hats, blue hats, there's a million different flavors of this. But the reality is, if you think about protecting the house that you live in, right? We all have to do security in our house. So we would talk to someone with intelligence who very simply explains, well, close your door, put a lock on your door, maybe put a deadbolt on your door, buy a camera, buy a security system. So that is the equivalent of a white hat hacker in physical security, and you can go to great lengths with barbed wire and so on, right? Cybersecurity is completely the same, right? And you have to think of this as a policeman, right? In the real world, the policeman protects us and keeps us safe, right? In the computer world, it's the white hat hacker that protects us and keeps us safe. And one of the key things for me is, Eric mentioned my background. I'm a journalist. I write for music magazines. So where do I buy my music? Well, actually, you sell the magazine online. I buy my records online. I buy my concert tickets online. So I can't not use the internet. So I just want it to be safe. So we need policemen and policewomen, right, to protect us. So it's a mindset. Do you want to be a good person, make the world a safer place, or do you not? And I view every day that anything we can do to give advice or put a system in place to protect someone, then I've achieved something. Do I completely make the internet safe? No. And you know why? The only safe internet has no users and no people on it, right? So no connectivity. So there isn't a safe internet, but we can make it safer.
Yeah, unless we're a closed system, it can't be truly safe. And even a closed system still has issues and how it's closed. But I think that's part of, and we talked about this in other episodes and other ways, but the idea that the internet is an open and free space leaves room for a nefarious side to do things that aren't on the up and up and aren't okay with everybody. And that's part of freedom. The freedom to be good, the freedom to be bad. They have to coexist.
Yeah, agreed.
I want to back up a little bit just to the root of the word hacker, because I think this is important, because I hear it all the time. I heard it on the news last night, and the media refers to hackers implying that they did bad.
But at the same time, it's like, why is a life hack
well, again, so the term itself, if we start, the word hack or hacker or hackney, from my understanding, comes from way back before technology, before the internet, before computers. And it was, if I understand it, English, UK derivative, and it was had something to do with transportation. I know that still exists in maybe not as much in the world of Uber and Lyft, but used to refer to cab drivers as hacks.
Yes.
There was a TV show maybe 20 years ago called Hack, and it was about a cab driver solving crimes. It was kind of those, but he was a hack, had nothing to do with computers. It was because he was a cab driver.
So what does
and hackney cabs were really the old, the black cabs in England. I don't know how it traversed, but my earlier understanding of hacking was as just making things happen, getting things done, or doing something that, using pieces and components to do something they weren't intended for, finding new use, finding new ability, and just kind of hacking something into something else. And my favorite old go-to analogy of this, again, I'll go back to media again, was the original MacGyver series, where MacGyver, the character, he would always get stuck in some situation, and then based on what he had available to him, somehow get out of the jail cell. Using a paper clip and a stick of gum, he could make a key and do things. And it was around using what he had available to accomplish something they weren't intended for. Mm-hmm. Which to me is what hacking always was. And when you refer to life hacks, that's what they are. And that's a positive connotation of the word hack. It has nothing to do.
Go back to the word hackney and let's think about that. I mentioned visibility, right? And visibility is really, really important. So why in London did the undermanned police force use the hackney cabs? Well, guess what? In London, people don't own vehicles, so they travel on the tube or in a hackney cab. So there's hackney black cab drivers all over London. They're still there today. So who's going to have the best visibility of what's happening on the streets? The hackney cab drivers. So that's where that comes, that to help the police with visibility and information, right? Because you can't protect it if you don't see it and you don't know what's happening. So that's where they gathered that information, right? So it's information gathering. And I talked about that in my role. I need to gather information on what is important to the business or to the government, and then what's going on, and then I can protect it. So we start with that visibility. So, and I think that's the key point in that, Eric.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'd agree. Knowing what's going on, knowing what's where, and again, a hacker has to know the environment. They have to, and they're learning, but then also repurposing. But where did the term kind of turn? We actually still hear the term in other ways, and this is, a lot of words have multiple definitions, but like someone who's not really good at what they do, they're just a hack. Like I'm at golf, I'm just a hack. I'm not good at it, but I hack at the ball and I do okay. But but it can be used in all kinds of different ways. But in our term and related to computers, it has become this negative connotation of someone who's trying to break into things. And if you look up, and I did in prep, try to kind of do a little research. How is it actually defined? Because I don't often analyze it or think about it that deeply. But depending on the dictionary or reference you check, the first definition is someone who breaks into computer systems to do harm.
Really?
Versus others that define as someone who uses creativity and skill to accomplish tasks, not necessarily nefarious. Then a later definition is to cause harm. And it's that, I think, has become the top definition. But how and where did it come from?
Yeah, and what...
Why do people assume it's bad?
Yeah, when did it start to become a bad thing?
I think part of that problem goes back to the Bay Area in 1979. So Rank Xerox was doing a lot of development in computing, right? So very few people owned computers, but there was companies like Rank Xerox and other ones building the technology in the Bay Area, and they wanted computers to work better. So they created a virus, and the virus made the computer work better, right? Now, again, like hacking, virus is a bad word in most people's connotations. And I think this is kind of the problem, right? The things that started off being a good thing became a bad thing, right? And it's just the way you look at it rather than whether it really means that. And it becomes popular in that sense. You know, if Eric, you and I do our jobs and we protect the company's not going to put that in the newspaper because they don't want people to know they caught the bad guys. However, you know, the regulator, the press, they love to announce Company A, you know, lost some information. Isn't this terrible? So unfortunately, it's perceived by the general public in that way. And unfortunately, it's a lack of understanding rather than, you know, anyone getting it wrong, right? They're not being told the right information, so they believe what they're told. I think it's that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the media has, you know, it's just a huge factor of it.
Yeah, well, the media is always influential in how they see it, whether they understand it or not, or whether they're the ones writing the copy or the anchors delivering the story. When they use the word hacker, they usually have that implication to it. And we'll go back even outside of the news and the news media, but Hollywood.
I was going to say, it's like never reported with something positive.
Well, how many of us have seen the movie Hackers? You know, that's Hollywood actually throwing the word out there as the title of the movie. Kind of a goofy movie. When was that, 90? Give or take a few years, somewhere early 90s. And I'll blame a movie like that takes the word and has it represent a bunch of kids, high school kids that are hacking the planet. And you know, some of them have done time for their previous crimes, and they're all kind of portrayed as, you know, ne'er-do-wells. They're up to no good. They're breaking stuff, and you know, the authorities, the parents, the teachers, they're all against them, and these kids are doing bad things. They're hackers, and you know.
I was going to say, we never hear stories about any positive.
The media never says a white hat protected their company last night.
Yeah.
That they thwarted an attack. It's not sensational, but the
then
hacker.
It's Christmas now, so Die Hard, like one of the Christmas movies. The fourth one, Die Hard 4.0. is about hackers hacking into nuclear power stations, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they call it 4.0, the computer link. So again, they're not talking about the people that did all the things to protect that. They're talking about the guys who were going to blow up a nuclear power station and kill us all, right? So it actually comes way worse than a computer, right? We're now going to say the whole world's at danger because we've got this hacker.
Great movie reference, by the way, with Timothy Oliphant, who I love. And who was the hacker that John McClane recruited to help him? That was funny. What's his name? Justin Long, who in the old
Sounds
commercial
about right, yeah.
Mac. Yeah, the guy, the nerd was the PC, but he was the cool kid. He was the Mac, and he's the hacker in that. The let's call him the skilled cyber engineer.
Yes.
Whatever we want to call it. But that was a great movie example of reference where hacking is very prominent in that. And the bad guys, of course, are, changing all the traffic lights to accommodate them and slow down the good guys that are in pursuit of them.
Before you go off that, here's a key piece of information about that film. So the background to that film is a real event, right? And the media took a real event and decided to extrapolate that. So this is a really important thing for organizations to understand, that this is all about access controls, right? So if you don't have visibility about what's going on in your environment and you don't have people looking at that visibility and taking action, then you don't protect yourself. So this is all about misuse of security privileges, right? And then somebody leaving an organization and their account not being deleted. So very, very simple things for people to understand that has now been complicated because we're bringing in the word hacking, right? It's actually really simple. An employee leaves the company, terminate their access, and you wouldn't have Die Hard 4.0.
Right. Clean up old accounts, clean up service accounts. Well, you even get into the concept of reducing, which we've done in other episodes, talked about authentication and permissions control, not just strong authentication, weak authentication, but then once you have authenticated, what can you do based on proving who you are?
So is the purpose of like white hat hacking to try to hack stuff to figure out like
Break into the systems without bad intent to prove how it can be done and then figure out how to stop it.
Okay.
That's a lot of it. And again, Ken mentioned earlier, all the different colors of hats.
That's what I wanted to get into that. I was like, how many are there, Ken?
You can make one up right now if you wanted, Chelsea. What's your favorite color? In a
Well, my favorite color is red, but there you go. That's just because I like red for Liverpool. But basically, kind of, that's actually black, grey, white, green, blue, and red, right? And they're not all bad. In fact, most of them are not bad, right? So yeah, black is bad. Black is definitely bad, right? And even sort of the grey one's kind of a weird one. They're trying to do bad things, but they actually just find the hole. They don't exploit it. So, but they then want money, right? So that they are kind of are bad. They're like semi-bad, right? Whereas the white guys and the blue and red teams, they're going to try and protect the company, right? So they're looking for potential risks, and then so they need the visibility, and then how do they protect the organization from those risks with the right tools, the right hardware and software products. So there's,
like from blue from red. What's the difference?
Oh, so it's what they look at, right? It's the way they behave. So basically, if you've got a big security team, as you might have your white hats, there's the people like Eric and I, then you'll have your blue team and your red team, and they'll run tests to test your vulnerabilities. So they're looking for vulnerabilities in your organization, physical. It actually goes way beyond computing, actually. It's actually physical to the perimeter. They test the perimeter defenses of the organization, physical and computer-wise, and then work out what they have to do. So they have to work together, those teams. Generally, companies don't have enough staff to have all these separate teams, so one or two people end up wearing all those different hats. And there's actually some conferences that they have the guy changing his hat, which makes it even more complicated, right? They actually wear hats and change the colors to demonstrate that. So really, the key thing is what Eric and I are trying to say here is that most of the people that involved in looking at this are experts in the technology and are looking for vulnerabilities and then looking at ways to protect that. So there's a lot more good than bad, which is why we're going to use engineers and names like that to protect rather than use the word hacker.
Yeah, well, that's part of our concept. There's a lot more people trying to do good, but there's a lot more challenge in doing that. And as many of us, organizations, individuals that are trying to do good, the bad guys still get through because it's not perfect. And it's so easy. All you need is one little breach, one little vulnerability, someone can get through and do bad things. It's a matter then of mitigating the exposure and trying to keep it all
Well, and the impact,
contained.
I feel like, is often so big that we forget that there's good.
Well, when we talk in other episodes about breaches themselves, that's a whole different category, a whole different episode, and size and scope and different aspects of breaches. But it's the white hat in general encompasses everyone who's in it for the right reasons, for good as opposed to bad. Black hat is bad, and even the bad intent varies. And we talk about this elsewhere too. The intent of a black hat or a cyber criminal can be financial, can be political, can be just pain in the butt, wants notoriety and defaces something. There's so many different motivations for it. I think that's part of where the word hacker loses its meaning, because I'm doing it for good, I'm doing it for bad, I'm doing it for this bad versus another bad. You know, what is bad? And even the word bad, I guess we could argue bad is a subjective thing. You know, if you're working for a nation state that's attacking another nation state for what you think are valid patriotic reasons, you don't think you're the bad guys.
So could you be a white hat in one country, but a black hat to a different country?
There's again, getting into nation state cybersecurity we do elsewhere, but I mean, I would think yes. Ken?
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, I've worked for many governments, and obviously when I'm employed by a government, I'm doing the things that that government wants me to do. I'm pretty certain that other governments would not agree with that, and they would view my actions, you know, very differently. And you know, we have to be careful here, because we're going to get into like data privacy and all these kind of conversations around that. You know, what one government decides is legal to look at is not going to be the same as another government, right, with different views. Or even when you change presidents, and I'm really going to not be political, but it's a political statement, right? So yeah, you know, I'm pretty certain people could look at my career if they knew what I did, if I was able to tell them what I did, and say, oh, I don't think you should have done that. And I'll stand behind, obviously, when I started that, I signed the Official Secrets Act. I swore my allegiance to the Queen, and I was given instructions, and I followed those instructions for the benefit of the government I was working on. So in my mind, that was completely white. However, if you didn't like that country, I'm pretty certain you'd have a different view.
So now, if you swore allegiance to the Queen, you don't have to honor that anymore because there's no Queen now.
Well,
King, right?
that's true, but here's the funny aspect of that. Well, to have a security clearance, you have to live in the country you have the clearance in. So the minute I moved to America, my clearance lapsed, right? However, there's databases that people appear on that the Five Eyes share and other things. So there's all kinds of weird connotations around that. But that would be like 6 episodes in itself.
So, question, how often, like, as a white hat, how often are you doing things that you might even find to be unethical? Or
Yeah, you know,
ethics of what you're doing?
yeah, when I'm employed by an organization, a company, or a government agency, sometimes I have to look at it and go, why did I choose to do this? Why am I doing this? But I have to realize that if it's for the good of that company, and we've taken the contract to do that company, then that's the right thing to do, right? You kind of have to park your conscience to one side a little bit. It's a great question, Chelsea, because I can't be political when I'm doing those things, and I can't dislike the company I'm working for, right? You know, we all have companies we dislike for various reasons, right?
Well, you can, and that can change over time. You know, you could become soured. You could start to see things a little bit differently, or learn more. You could become an Edward Snowden.
Yes.
And, you know, your ethics are a malleable thing, and you could be working for the NSA and then eventually have some aha moment, or gradually change your tone and realize that, oh, gee, maybe some of what we're doing isn't ethical or good, or I disagree with it, and then you shift and you expose a bunch of stuff.
So my answer to that is from very personal. I'm not speaking on behalf of any company or any government. If I have that aha moment, that's the day I stop doing it. I do not expose it. I'm very clear on that. Once I'm given a role to perform that action for the right reasons, that's the role I'll perform. I will admit we're getting into a very grey area here. But
I don't want to even side with or against Snowden.
No, I know.
But it's an interesting example of how it doesn't always stay the same, and what you do, and then we can get into other things like Stuxnet.
But he took an action, right, that I don't agree with,
Yeah.
because when I'm doing my job, I'm paid money to do a job. I'm not
When you're
paid
in
to
the
think about it.
employ of one organization, your focus is on that organization. If you disagree
Correct.
with the organization, and then you can do other things. But what you do while you're with that organization should stay with them, and what you're
Yes.
exposed to and that information stays. And that's where you kind of cross one of those. It's a different ethical line, but it is one of those ethical lines. I want to back it up and simplify a little bit to where there's less gray area. You mentioned you're a Liverpool supporter.
Yep.
And I haven't brought up your soccer career and your football career, but I know you're big into football.
Yep.
Like you played or
You played.
Sorry, Chelsea.
Chelsea asked if you played.
Yeah, you played.
Oh no, I played from age 8 to 50, and I played internationally at an amateur level, but not anymore.
But
Okay. I'm like, how
he
did
has
we not
played.
touch
He has
this?
played
Yeah.
in the past. But I think it's an interesting example because, as an analogy, sports are one of those. What side are you on? You're on
Yes.
the Liverpool side, or you're on the Man City side, and from your perspective, you scoring goals and stopping the other guys is a good thing. But from their
Yes.
perspective, it's opposite, and it's very easy on the battlefield of sports to illustrate that there's a good and a bad, but it's which side you're sitting on or which arena you're in.
Right.
But from their perspective, they're both fighting for good.
Right.
And I think when it comes to nation state, that's easier. I think there's the
Kind of like
other,
every war that exists too.
Sure.
Depending on what
Most
side
of
you're
them.
on.
Yeah.
You know?
And again, history is written by the victors too. So what we know about it is all written from the those who succeeded
True.
and can now say what they want about the other guys. But, in much of cybercrime, though, it's not that. It's people that know they're doing unethical, evil things. They're attacking for financial reasons or whatever. And they know it's not okay. It's not ethical. But there are other cases where I think it's a little bit more gray. And
Yes.
I'll pick up another term with hack at its root, and that's hacktivism.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this whole little subgroup of hackers that are doing it to further what they think is an ethical cause, to either say, we need to be better to the planet or to animals or to whatever. You get activists that, do black hat stuff to further what they think is a good cause.
Well, okay, so Ken, I have a question for you. You said that you are, you are passionate about educating youth in this area, but I'm like, where do you learn to hack? Where do people? Is there classes or?
Yeah. No, I've actually got a university qualification. I'm a qualified hacker, right? So universities inside cybersecurity degrees and also separately will run courses. There's lots of organizations that will have their own courses. It's funny that Eric mentioned football or soccer. I use the chess analogy. And chess is an interesting game of tactics. But the really weird thing is the good guys in the cyber chess game can never win the game, right? They're just obviously trying to anticipate the 6 movements of the bad guys and defend against that, right? But they can never get to checkmate. But if they make a mistake, the bad guy checkmates them. But yeah, there's lots of people who give lectures on cybersecurity risks, right? There's lots of universities that have incredible courses now, and then an awful lot of companies are actually trying to educate the world because they realize that this is I don't use the word black art, right? It's considered a black art, the role that we do, because it's complicated, right? And so they try to educate the general world population to help them to do that and try and avoid some of the risks. And there are some simple things.
Do you think it's an issue with like we can teach someone how to do it, whether they use it for good or bad, though?
Well, in your courses you took, I'm going to guess, I'm going to go out there on a limb and say some of that had to involve some ethics classes or discussion about ethics and proper use, because they're giving you these skills, but I imagine if they're doing this at a university level, they're also telling you.
You're like arming somebody.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we arm the right people. Then.
Well, and give them education around what's right and what's not right and where those lines are that you don't want to cross.
Right.
And then just hope for the best and hope that nobody dangles a carrot in front of them that says, yes, do this for bad and make a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah. To go to Chelsea's question, though, it's interesting because obviously today there are more mobile phones in America than people, right? And then we've got computers. So obviously, I've got a 3-year-old grandson. He looks at the phone and watches his videos, right? So he knows how to turn his videos on an iPhone, right? Already. Um, he certainly has not been trained in cybersecurity, right? But he's trained on how to use that technology. So I think it's a great question, Chelsea, because everybody uses the internet. I've got elderly parents. I have multiple sets of parents, and I'm not going to tell you which one's which, but one set of parents follows my guidance and doesn't do the things they shouldn't do. The other parents email me every day with all kinds of malicious videos and links, and I'm like, please don't do that. I work in cybersecurity. So, and they're not doing it bad, maliciously, as Eric said, but there is a line about, to your question, Chelsea, about they just think it's cool. They can find things on the internet and share it, right? As opposed to, what am I sharing, and is it a good thing to share it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that makes perfect sense. I'm like phishing.
Yeah, I've done a lot of that with family. Actually, years ago, before it was so much around malicious content, it was just like garbage content, just stuff that
Yeah.
people are spamming just to get this fake news out there. Before we even used the term fake news, it was, hey, I read this thing. Is this bad? Should I be doing this? And I'd point them to certain websites where they were debunking that and saying, actually, that's a 10-year-old article. It's not true. Don't send them your money, or whatever it is they were trying to do. It's that massive.
Yeah, we can give people a really good tip here. The rule should be never copy and paste on the internet, because if someone's saying you have to copy and paste, it's because they want you to copy the malicious code embedded in the video or the link they've got. You should not never ever ever copy and paste things you don't know who wrote it.
Well, it's really an evolution, or really a devolution of back in the old analog world and snail mail, the chain letter. If you're, this is dating myself quite a bit, and I look at Ken, because at least Ken maybe can relate to this, where you get a letter in the mail from a friend that said, hey, you have to copy this letter and send it to 10 friends and name
Was
them all
it
on the bottom of the
a
letter,
physical
or you're going to
copy?
have bad luck, or you'll be cursed. And
Okay.
it was physical snail mail, and then they get it, and then they have to come up with 10 friends and send it to. And
Yeah.
it was really just to see how, how pervasive it could be, how much you could get it to propagate. And it was prior to the internet. It was via letters.
I didn't know that they ever
and it
did
was always, okay,
physically.
rip this thing up, throw it away. Yeah, give me bad luck, curse me, whatever it is. That became a thing on the internet.
Yeah.
As a cheaper way of doing it. You didn't need to put a stamp on it. Just send an email and tell people here, put new people at the end of the list. And it even became scams for finance. It was send $1 to each of the people on this
Yeah.
list. Add 10 people, send it to 10 people, include all the names that are on this. And the idea was one of those guys is included in everybody's list. So everybody's sending him $1, and he ends up getting, $5, because most people, I think, saw through it pretty quick. But
Yeah, that was your first pyramid scheme, right? No, it's true, right? This is all about understanding, if we're being honest, right? Rather than technology and demystifying it. We both love that word, demystify. But what we're trying to do is, demystify something that's very complicated to give a better understanding, and then you've got a better chance of making the world a safer place.
So when did hacker become when did that start? That it was negative.
That's a good question, because I've tried to figure that out myself, and I'll reference, I've always thought of it way back. I'll have to mention when in the 80s. I had it as a bullet item, as a skill on a resume. I would actually say I'm a hacker, because I had a positive connotation. I think most of the world did. If they knew what the word meant, they understood it as, oh, you can make things happen. I've even made the statement that without hackers, the internet wouldn't exist as it is today, because it was all a matter of taking things that existed, ARPANET, and I won't even get into the whole history, but trying to repurpose it and do other things with it. It's like, oh, wait, we have this thing. We can use it for that.
Yeah.
And we can use it for this, and we can find other ways to connect. So hacking is what moves technology forward. So it's vital, I think. But I think the movie Hackers, we already mentioned, was a beginning of a downturn in what it meant, and the assumption, because that was big Hollywood, high-profile cast and everything. But I actually went back to in thinking about that. When did it turn? Because one of my favorite movies to reference both good and bad cybersecurity was War Games in 1983 with Matthew Broderick, where he hacks, the military, and Yet I actually found online the script or the text from it, and nowhere in that movie is the word hack or hacker ever used. Which to me means, as of 1983 in popular culture, it wasn't recognized as a word for what he did. Which I thought that was cool, because I kind of theorized. I don't remember it being used, but he is what you would think of, Daniel, as a hacker, but the term was never used. So in 1983, at least, from popular mass media, I would say it probably wasn't a word that people would have understood or had any understanding of. But then by whenever the movie Hackers came out, maybe they didn't understand before that.
Ken, what
I,
sparked you?
I was going to say on that in the 1990s, there was no word cybersecurity, there was no computer crime, right? It wasn't defined as a legal thing, right? So I would imagine somewhere in the 1990s, as the governments and lawyers defined it was computer crime originally, that's where the hacking connection came into it. I'm with you. I don't really know exactly. I do know I definitely went to university in the late 1990s for the hacking course, so it was there at least at that level. But
Before you have, go ahead. Sorry.
that was a good cause, right? This is when hacking was meant to be good, right? This is how you protect a company, by understanding the risk.
I'm curious, like, who the first malicious hack. I wonder what it was and when it was.
Well, they've existed for a long time, and I think it even goes back before the internet. You get to more private digital communications. I go to names like Mitnick and others that were doing things to gain access to data they weren't supposed to have.
I got to say, in '87, that was the first year that we have defined viruses, which are a sense of hack, right? You create a virus to do the hacking for you, so it's not physically someone doing it. But 1987 is when we go back to Jerusalem, Levy, Miami, and Almeida viruses that attacked companies, and then it went on to the next year, '88, with the worms for ARPANET and things. So that's really your computer beginning of those things. And people got more skilled in writing those viruses and things, right?
Yeah, because that was really doing bad things with it.
Yeah.
Versus up until then, it was, hey, what cool things can we do? And it was all very positive. And coding, and everyone was sharing all their code. It was very much, hey, we're all advancing this
Like
technology
positive,
together. And that'll always happen with technology, and then someone will take advantage of it and use it another way. And then it starts to turn. Well, you mentioned there was no cyber crime. There was no computer crime, because before you have computers, you don't have crime around them. And one of my favorite analogies in talking about computers and networks is automotive industry and driving. Before there were cars, there were no speed limits.
Yeah.
And even the early cars, it's like, oh, you can go 10 miles an hour on that thing. That's great. More power to you. Until you start having high-speed accidents, you don't have to start limiting speeds and trying to have rules of the road. So I think the whole computer and technology world had to evolve significantly before you start to have regulations and laws, and arguably a lot of it came too late.
Yeah, we destroyed our computers with LimeWire. I remember that growing up.
Well, I remember old viruses like the Stone virus or Flipped, where it was just a matter of, the screen would be inverted and say this computer's flipped. I had a client, this is really long time ago, that had their green screen monitor on their PC was upside down on their desk because they've gotten the flip virus, and that's how they figured out how to mitigate it. I loved their ingenuity, because the screen was inverted, but they just inverted the screen. Now it looked right again. Not really a solution, but a good workaround. It was a good hack.
It's kind of funny, because I'm really...
hack of their computer to make the virus not matter, because they flipped the screen, and sorry.
Yeah, because I'm really old. There was a thing, we used to use DOS before we had Windows, Chelsea, and it was all command line on a computer. Somebody created silly DOS, and it was meant to be fun, but when I think about it, it was a hack, because you would type a command that was meant to do some work for you, and the computer would tell you to go away, I'm busy, right? So basically you intercepted the command to do some work and made a joke, and it was very, and I can remember technicians, and one of them may be talking right now, that thought it was funny to wind some secretary up and go in and put the silly DOS on a computer, right? So she'd have to phone the help desk and ask for help. But when I think about it, it really wasn't that clever a thing to do.
I will admit, I actually modified DOS a couple of times to have it instead of say MS-DOS, because you had IBM PC-DOS and you had Microsoft
Yeah.
DOS, which was all written by Microsoft. That's where Gates got his start. But I had modified it so it had my name in it instead. So it was like EA DOS and just for fun. And you could modify commands, though. You could easily go into the code that was the operating system and change things just for fun. And that was hacking. But that's exploring. That's learning what's possible. That's learning how to do things, which then can be used for productive purposes as well.
So Ken,
Yeah.
if you had to make your own how would you define what hacking is or what a hacker is?
Yeah, so I prefer to sit on the side of making the world a safer place. So understanding the visibility, the risks, the vulnerabilities, and then protecting it, right? So that's the good side. The bad side is using the same processes to disrupt a business or a government, right, and causing harm. So it's an interesting definition because it means two completely different things. But I think we've got to use that term to cover both of them because that's what hacking really is, right? And it would be much nicer if we had a separate word for the good guys than the bad guys that was clear and used that way.
I'm thinking out loud here, which I do often. I honestly, I haven't thought of this before, but I'm just wondering if maybe the word hacker, because using it, I tend not to use it because I know it's misinterpreted, or the way I mean it and the way I feel it should mean is different than what other people think of. I think it's almost like the word soldier. It implies a skill set, it implies actions, but it doesn't imply intent.
Right.
A soldier, to bring that back to our sports comparison, where there's two sides, whether they're good or bad depends on which side you're on.
Right, it's a player
But
too.
a hacker is a form of a soldier. They're doing things that could be for good, could be for bad, but it doesn't,
Yeah.
shouldn't imply either. But for that reason,
It's a set of
most
skills,
people
really.
assume they're an evil soldier. They're attacking me because they're hackers. I tend to just not use the word and use black hat or cyber criminal or other things when there's malintent, and good guys or something else when it's a hacker for positive reasons.
Yeah, but again, it depends on where.
It's perspective.
Yeah,
Which is another one of our big words, is perspective and empathy, and having the right, or having various or understanding there are other perspectives.
yeah.
There's somebody on the other side of everything too. So are all hackers bad? Can we sum that question up with an answer? I
No.
think that's a pretty
Yeah, the
definitive
answer's
one.
no.
They're not all bad. It's understand the word properly and no. Can we, in front of a broad audience, say, I'm a hacker and expect them to know what we mean? No.
But should more people be saying they're hackers then, to kind of change that
Own it.
viewpoint, right? Like,
Well, I want to go back to, because another thought I had coming kind of full circle, we mentioned the movie Hackers.
Yeah.
And I mentioned hacktivists. If you remember the movie, not to spoil this for anyone, it's not a great movie. I'm not saying you should all go see it. It's interesting, it's entertaining, nothing against it really. But those kids that were portrayed as ne'er-do-wells, up to no good, troublemakers. Do you remember what actually happened, Ken? Did you see the movie? I don't even know if I asked you if you saw it, but ultimately, they saved the planet. They're not the bad guys. It's the corporate side that was actually the bad guys. And even if you go more recently to Mr. Robot, you know, the opposition in Mr. Robot, and I love in the movie they did this, that Ishmael did this, that the evil entity was called Evil Corp. That was actually the name that they're, you know, doing their things against. But even in the movie Hackers, the hackers end up saving the planet through their hacking.
okay.
But it's still portrayed as a negative, as a derogatory term.
So in courses and stuff, do they call it like a hacking class, or is there a different term that they use?
Ethical
because-
hacking.
Okay, okay.
That is a term. But there is no term for unethical hacking. That's just hacking.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, have you heard it that way?
Yeah, I when people ask me, I say I'm an ethical hacker. I don't use white hat. That would be the way I describe myself. But unfortunately, the word ethical has political connotations as well, right? So I still actually don't like that.
Yeah. Which color jersey are you wearing?
Yes, like what are my ethics? But I think actually it sums it up correctly. Like you said, a soldier to one side is a good guy, to the other side is a bad guy. I actually like to differentiate between the privates in the army and the rear admiral or the general, right? And suggest that maybe the political aspect of that, right? Yeah.
job. Well, when it comes to the ethics, like, well, I don't want to get too political again, but even when you go to past wars, and there are certain sides in some wars where there were sides that were definitely, again, by the victors now portrayed as evil and really bad. But even them blame their management, their officers.
Yes.
They're following orders. They're doing their duty. And as far as they know, as far as they've been raised, this is their duty, is to do the following. You could probably argue the same thing with black hats or unethical hackers or bad guys, that they were just raised to know this is what they do. This is how you make money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exactly what I did when you asked me that question about my ethics, right? And the Edward Snowden case, I defended it by, that's my contract, and I choose to sign that contract, and if I do, I should follow that contract, right? Can I question it? Yeah, come on, you can question everything you do.
Yeah, I think that's where it gets interesting, is can you question your boss? Can you question, what those orders are, and can you defy them, with the risk of court-martial or whatever the ramifications are? Is it worth it? And that's what sometimes will be held over you is, okay, you can think about this, you can question your orders,
But you still have to do them.
then you're in violation and you can be punished.
Yeah.
And then do you become the whistleblower, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you become a Snowden. His
Right.
ethics drove him in a certain way, and is he a good guy or a bad guy? Is he a Robin Hood? Is he a hero, or did he break the law? And does the law need to change? That's again, you get into all these areas that we could debate forever, and we could get into a whole different discussion. Ken, and we will probably we'll have you back, because there's so much more we could do. I'd love to explore more with you and get into other areas, but I think we're getting late.
Yeah. I had one last question. So what is your favorite part of being a hacker? Like, if you could say one thing that you love about it the most, what is it?
Yeah, so I like using my experience to help an organization. And that's why I start off with the introduction that I did to you. I explain my background because I've got this wide view of working in all these countries and doing different things, and then trying to apply that. And if I can protect an organization in some form or way, I take a lot of satisfaction from that. And I also take a lot of satisfaction from even these kind of conversations, because if one person listens to this and understands it better, then I feel I've made the world a safer place. So I know I've said that like 5 times in this meeting, but that's my goal. I do volunteer work for Hire Heroes USA and things like that for that purpose, Chelsea.
I think that after this conversation with you, my takeaway is also that honestly, you can do more good like as a hacker. There's more good you can do.
That's a great takeaway. It's the connotation, I think. But to your answer, doing good is an ultimate, great goal, great lofty thing to help others. My personal hacking, I get off because I like solving problems. I just like solving problems, whatever they are. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that problem is a technical one where I need to get this thing done. I don't have the right parts, I don't have the right software, but I need to do it anyway. Hack together a solution. And that's how I've always seen it, as how I've always gotten into problem solving with technology. But it even goes beyond technology into other things in analog life. And I would argue that more people, if you use the word that way and think of that hacking as problem solving, like MacGyver, that had nothing to do with computers, that more people than you would think are hackers. Mm-hmm. Occasionally. There's probably things you've done, like life hacks. Yeah. That term of life hacks, where people figure out ways to, I don't have the right measuring spoon, but I can still figure out how to get a teaspoon or whatever. Like, you find ways all the time. So I would say to the world, embrace your inner hacker. Yeah. For good reasons. As long as you're doing it, for good. Yeah. Don't assume that because you do this thing that it's bad. If you've got the good reasons, and don't go attacking companies. Don't go breaching, compromising, breaking laws. I would never profess or recommend that. But yeah, the concept of hacking, I still think I will continue to see it as a positive more than a negative. Yeah, and I hope that changes, because I feel like, especially speaking with the two of you, it is a positive thing. I don't expect it'll change, but those who know. If you know, you know. We're okay with it. Ken and I will refer to each other as hackers and be okay with that. But I don't blame the world for having different understandings. It's the way the world goes, and terms do change over time. So all hackers are not bad.
Correct.
But hopefully now we have a broader understanding of what that all means, and right. Fun.
Yes.
We explained something, maybe.
I think we did. We explained hackers a bit more, you know?
Okay.
We demystified it, Eric. Come on.
Demystified, but we're
You
not
guys
called
in-
demystifiers. We're called cybersplainers. So we have to say it that way.
Maybe we change the name because you guys are really on a kick with this one.
Demystifiers. We've used that word. I like it because it's, mystic.
Yeah.
Sounds cool, but things are mysterious. We want to make them less so. And that's what cybersplaining is all about. So
It is.
Yep.
thank you
Love
for
it.
helping us do
Yes.
so, Ken.
You have been such a pleasure too. I just want to hear all your stories too. I feel like he's the most interesting man in the world.
That's the
Dos
Dos Equis guy.
Yeah, that's what
Sorry.
I was like. He, let's give him a commercial.
I've got T, not Dulceki.
We'll find you during another season when you're decorated differently too, and we'll have you back and talk about some other cool stuff. But thank you so much for this, Ken. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure. And
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you very much, and happy holidays if I don't speak to you.
all right, and take care, everybody else as well. Thanks for joining us for another episode. I think we're good, but until then.
That's what I'm like. If we can get Eric to stop talking. I'm just kidding. But yes, thank you everyone for joining us again, and we will see you next time.
Stay safe.